The autumn winds carried the scent of smoke and salt as Dagmar Wulfsdottir stood atop the cliff, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore below. Her shield, worn from countless battles, lay at her feet alongside her blooded sword. The raid on the southern settlement had been successful, but she found no joy in it. 3 summers had passed since she'd joined the Shieldmaidens, 3 summers since she'd sworn to avenge her father's death at the hands of the Knutsons. Her fingers traced the falcon pendant at her throat, her father's last gift before he sailed to Valhalla on a tide of blood. "I will make them pay," she whispered to the wind. "Every last one of them." Behind her, the feast hall of Jarl Halvard blazed with light and laughter. The warriors celebrated their victory, but Dagmar had no taste for mead tonight. The blood of the fallen still stained her hands, yet her heart remained empty. Each raid, each death brought her no closer to peace. "The gods favor you, Dagmar Wulfsdottir," came a voice. Thorunn, the eldest Shieldmaiden, approached with steady steps despite her age. "6 men fell to your blade today. And still my father walks in Helheim," Dagmar replied, her voice hard as iron. "The gods mock me. 3 years of offerings, 3 years of battle, and still no sign of the man who took my father's life." "Perhaps the gods have other plans for you," Thorunn said, her weathered face solemn in the moonlight. "The only plan I serve is vengeance," Dagmar replied. "I will not rest until Knutson blood waters the earth and my father can feast in Valhalla knowing he was avenged." Thorunn's eyes, wise with years, studied her. "Such a heavy burden for one so young. Your skill with shield and sword is unmatched among the maidens, but a warrior who fights only for death finds only death waiting." Dagmar turned away. The old woman's wisdom held no comfort. What use was life without honor? What meaning could be found beyond fulfilling the blood oath she'd sworn? Love, family, a hearth of her own, these were luxuries she could not afford. Not while her father's killer still drew breath. "Come," Thorunn said, "Jarl Halvard summons all warriors. We sail with the dawn tide." The mead hall reeked of sweat and triumph. Warriors boasted of their deeds while thralls hurried between tables with pitchers and platters. Dagmar took her place among the Shieldmaidens, her back straight as a spear shaft. Jarl Halvard rose, silencing the hall with a raised hand. His grey-streaked beard was braided with gold rings, and the firelight caught on the arm rings that marked his status. "The raid was good," he announced, his voice filling the hall. "But summer wanes, and with it our raiding season. Before the first frost, we have one final task." He gestured to a map carved into a wooden table. "Here, in the fertile valley beyond the western fjord, lies the land of the Knutsons." Dagmar's breath caught. 3 years she had waited for this moment. "Their crops are ripe for harvest," the Jarl continued. "And we shall reap what they have sown. Their cattle will feed our people through winter. Their gold will adorn our women. Their blood will water the earth." The hall erupted in cheers, but Dagmar remained silent, her heart pounding like a war drum. At last, the gods had answered her prayers. The morning arrived shrouded in mist as 5 longships cut through the grey waters. Dagmar stood at the prow, her shield strapped to her back, her hand resting on her sword hilt. The other Shieldmaidens gave her space, recognizing the storm that brewed within her. "You should eat," Astrid said, offering dried fish. "A warrior fights poorly on an empty stomach." Dagmar took it without reply. Food was fuel, nothing more. Her thoughts were consumed by the face she had never seen, the man named Peder Knutson who had led the raid that killed her father. The man whose blood she would spill before the sun set. "Land ahead," called the watchman, and Dagmar's grip tightened on her sword. The ships beached on a secluded cove, hidden from view of the settlement. Jarl Halvard divided his forces, half would circle to the eastern approach, half would come from the west. The attack would begin when the horn sounded. Dagmar moved with the eastern party, her steps light despite the weight of her armor. They crept through a field of barley, the stalks golden and heavy with grain. Beyond lay the settlement, a collection of longhouses surrounded by a wooden palisade. "Remember," the Jarl said quietly, "we want their stores intact. Kill the warriors, take the young as thralls, but do not burn what we cannot carry." The horn bellowed across the valley, and Dagmar charged with her shield raised. The settlement erupted in panic, women gathering children, men rushing for weapons. The gate was open for the returning harvest wagons, leaving the settlement vulnerable. The clash of steel filled the air as Dagmar entered the fray. Her first opponent fell quickly, a bearded man whose axe swing came too slowly. Her second was younger, stronger, but his shield split under her calculated blows. "For Wulf," she cried as her blade found its mark. "For my father!" She fought her way toward the center of the settlement, where the Knutson longhouse stood. There she would find her target, the chieftain who had ordered her father's death. A group of defenders had formed a shield wall before the longhouse. Dagmar joined the attack, her shield locking with her fellow warriors as they pressed forward. The defenders' line began to buckle under the onslaught. Then from within the longhouse came a battle cry. A massive warrior emerged, his beard flaming red, his arms thick with muscle. He wore no armor, only a simple tunic and trousers, yet he wielded a great battle-axe with deadly precision. "Peder Knutson," someone whispered, and Dagmar's blood ran cold with recognition. She broke from the shield wall, charging directly at him. "Face me, murderer," she screamed. "Face the daughter of Wulf." The red-bearded man turned, surprise crossing his features as he saw a Shieldmaiden challenging him. His axe intercepted her sword strike, the impact jarring her arm to the shoulder. "I know not this, Wulf," he growled, pushing her back. "But if it's death you seek, I'll grant it gladly." They circled each other as the battle raged around them. Dagmar struck like lightning, her blade seeking flesh, but the man was faster than his size suggested. His axe swept in great arcs, forcing her to retreat time and again. "Your father raided our lands 3 summers past," she snarled. "He killed my father while he slept, like a coward." Something shifted in the man's eyes. "You're mistaken, Shieldmaiden. 3 summers past, I was in Hedeby trading for seed grain. My father led our warriors then." Before Dagmar could respond, a cry went up from the western edge of the settlement. Fire had caught in the dry thatch of a roof, against the Jarl's orders. The wind whipped the flames toward the stored harvest. "The grain," someone shouted. "Save the grain!" The battle lines dissolved as raiders and defenders alike turned their attention to the spreading fire. Dagmar hesitated, torn between her vengeance and her duty to her people. The red-bearded man made no such choice. He dropped his axe and ran toward the flames, bellowing orders. Men formed a line, passing buckets from the well. Dagmar stood frozen, watching as her sworn enemy fought to save not his gold or weapons, but the food that would sustain his people through winter. A burning timber crashed from a roof, striking the red-bearded man. He stumbled, then fell, pinned beneath the weight. Without thinking, Dagmar rushed forward, her vengeance forgotten. She heaved at the timber, straining against its weight. Another pair of hands joined hers, a young boy, no more than 12 summers, his face streaked with tears. "Help me save my brother," he pleaded. Together they rolled the burning wood aside. The man lay still, his tunic smoldering. Dagmar dragged him clear of the flames, surprising herself with her own actions. Why was she saving the kin of her enemy? As the fire spread, Jarl Halvard ordered a retreat. The raid had failed, they would take what they could carry and return to the ships. Dagmar found herself at a crossroads. Her duty was to rejoin her people, yet she could not leave the unconscious man to burn. "Come with me," the boy urged, pulling at her arm. "The eastern path leads to our winter stores. We can shelter there." Against all reason, Dagmar followed, half carrying the unconscious man away from the burning settlement. The smoke provided cover as they slipped past warriors on both sides, making their way to a stone storehouse built into the hillside. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of dried herbs and grain. The boy barred the door behind them, then helped Dagmar lay his brother on a pile of furs. "I am Leif," the boy said, looking at her with wary eyes. "And this is my brother, Peder Knutson." Dagmar's hand went to her sword. "Knutson? Then he is not the one you seek," Leif interrupted. "Our father was Canute the Red. He died last winter from the coughing sickness. Peder is chieftain now." Confusion washed over Dagmar. Her target was already dead, claimed not by her blade but by illness. It seemed an unworthy end for the man who had slain her father. She knelt beside the unconscious Peder, examining his wounds. Burns marked his arms where he had shielded his face, and a gash on his temple bled freely. Without speaking, she tore strips from her undershirt and bound his injuries. "Why do you help him?" Leif asked. "You came with the raiders." Dagmar had no answer that made sense, even to herself. "Your brother fought the fire when he could have fought me," she said finally. "A man who chooses to save grain over his own life deserves to see another dawn." Through the small window, Dagmar saw warriors searching the hillside. Soon they would discover this hiding place. "Your people will find us soon," she said. "When they do, they will kill me." Leif's young face hardened with a wisdom beyond his years. "And if your people find us first, they will kill us. So we wait together, and trust the Norns to weave our fate." Peder Knutson woke to pain and the unexpected sight of a Shieldmaiden tending a small fire in his family's storehouse. His hand reached instinctively for a weapon, finding none. "Be still," the woman said without turning. "Your wounds need time to heal." "You're the one who called for Wolf's vengeance," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke. She nodded, her profile sharp in the firelight. "I am Dagmar Wulfsdottir. And yet I live." He struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in his burned arms. "Why?" "I wish I knew," she replied, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were the deep blue of a winter sky, hard yet haunted. "Tell me of the raid 3 summers past." Peder studied her, measuring his words. "My father led our warriors to answer a blood debt. The settlement to the north had stolen our cattle and burned our shrine to Freya. He returned with fewer men than he left with." "And a man named Wolf? Did he die by your father's hand?" Peder's brow furrowed. "I know of no wolf among the fallen. But many died on both sides." Dagmar's certainty wavered. For 3 years, she had lived for vengeance against the Knutson clan. What if she had been wrong? Leif returned from his watch at the window. "The fighting has moved to the shore," he reported. "The raiders are being driven back to their ships." "Then I am your prisoner," Dagmar said flatly. Peder shook his head, then regretted it as pain lanced through his temple. "You saved my life. Under our laws, I owe you a life debt." "I came to kill you," she reminded him. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yet here I am, breathing still." "The gods work in strange ways," Dagmar Wulfsdottir. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps approached the storehouse. The door shuddered under a powerful blow. "Peder Knutson." "Are you within?" called a deep voice. "It's Bjorn," Leif whispered. Father's oath, brother. Peder raised his voice. I am here, Bjorn. I am wounded but alive. Open the door. We've driven the raiders back, but one of their Shieldmaidens is unaccounted for. Peder's eyes met Dagmar's. In them, she saw not hatred but a question. She answered by handing him her sword, hilt first. I surrender myself to your judgment, she said quietly. Peder took the weapon but set it aside. Leaf, open the door. Bjorn entered with drawn sword, followed by 2 warriors. Their eyes widened at the sight of Dagmar sitting calmly by the fire. Seize the Shieldmaiden, Bjorn ordered. No, Peder said, rising despite his pain. She saved my life when she could have taken it. She is under my protection until the thing can judge her fate. Bjorn's face darkened. She came with raiders who burned our homes and killed our people. And yet she remained to tend my wounds, Peder countered. The law is clear on life debts, Bjorn. The older warrior reluctantly lowered his sword. The settlement is in ruins. The people look to you for leadership, Peder. What would you have us do with this guest? Peder straightened, assuming the mantle of chieftain despite his injuries. We will rebuild, as we have always done. The harvest is mostly intact. We have stores for winter. He glanced at Dagmar. And we have a skilled warrior who owes us service in payment for her freedom. Dagmar's head snapped up. I have sworn no such oath. Would you prefer the judgment of the thing? Peder asked quietly. They might not be as forgiving as I. She understood the choice he offered, death or servitude. Until the spring thaw, she conceded. No longer. Bjorn protested, but Peder silenced him with a raised hand. It is decided. Dagmar Wulfsdottir remains as my guest until spring. She will work alongside our people to rebuild what her companions destroyed. As Bjorn and his warriors escorted them back to what remained of the settlement, Dagmar found herself adrift. Her purpose, her vengeance, had crumbled like ash. If Knut the Red had not killed her father, who had? And what was she to do with the winter that stretched before her, living among those she had come to destroy? The days following the raid were filled with back-breaking labor. Houses needed rebuilding before the first snows. Grain that had been rescued from the flames required proper storage. Livestock needed securing. Dagmar worked alongside the women of the settlement, aware of their suspicious glances and whispered words. She did not blame them. Had their positions been reversed, she would have slit the throat of any raider foolish enough to remain. Peder Knutson surprised her. Despite his wounds, he labored from dawn till dusk, directing the rebuilding efforts. He did not command from comfort but worked with his hands, a chieftain who smelled of sweat and sawdust rather than mead and glory. You work like a thrall, she observed one evening as they ate a simple meal outside the half-finished longhouse. Yet your chieftain here. Peder tore a piece of bread and chewed thoughtfully before answering. My father believed a chieftain must be the first to battle and the last to feast. I believe a chieftain must also be the first to labor and the last to rest. How can I ask my people to build what I will not? Is that why you were trading for seed grain when other chieftains were raiding? She asked, remembering his words during their brief combat. He nodded. The axe harvests once. The plough harvests every season. A wry smile crossed his features. My father called me a farmer like it was an insult. Perhaps it was. Yet your people follow you. They follow because I feed them, he said simply. Glory in battle fills songs, not bellies. Dagmar considered this strange chieftain who valued grain over gold. Among her people, warriors held highest honor. Farmers were necessary but unremarkable. Yet there was something undeniably honorable in Peder's dedication to his people's survival. "Tomorrow we journey to the high meadow," Peder said, changing the subject. "The cattle were driven there during the raid. We must bring them down before the first snow." "I'll prepare," Dagmar replied, rising to leave. "Dagmar," he called as she walked away. "Bring your shield." She turned, questioning. "The wolf packs grow bold in autumn," he explained. "We may need a Shieldmaiden's protection." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged her warrior status since the raid. She nodded, something like respect kindling between them. The journey to the high meadow took them through dense forest and rocky slopes. Dagmar rode beside Peder, with Leif and 3 other men completing their party. The boy had attached himself to Dagmar in the days since the raid, peppering her with questions about shields and swords and battles. "How many men have you killed?" he asked as they rode. "Leif!" Peder scolded. "That's no question for the table or the trail." "It's fine," Dagmar said, studying the eager boy. "I've sent 23 men to Valhalla or Helheim. And each one took a piece of me with them." Leif's excitement dimmed at her solemn tone. "Death isn't glorious, young Knutson," she continued. "It's bloody and messy and final. The skalds sing of battle like it's a dance. It isn't. It's butchery with purpose." "What purpose did you have?" Peder asked quietly. Dagmar's hand went to the falcon pendant at her throat. "Vengeance. My father was slain 3 summers past. I believed it was by Canute the Red's hand." Peder frowned. 3 summers ago, we raided northward, toward Hedeby. Was your settlement in that direction? No. We lived westward, along the fjord. Then it couldn't have been our clan, Peder said. We've not raided westward in a generation, not since the peace weaving between our grandfather and the western clans. Confusion clouded Dagmar's features. "But I was told." The survivors said the raiders carried the Knutson Raven banner. Peder reined his horse to a stop. "Our banner is the wheat sheaf and sword, not the raven. It has been since my grandfather's time." The foundation of Dagmar's vendetta cracked beneath her. "Then who killed my father?" "That," Peder said grimly, "is a question worth answering." They crested a hill to find the high meadow spread before them, dotted with cattle grazing peacefully. The men moved to gather the herd, while Dagmar and Peder scouted the perimeter. "Tell me about your father," Peder said as they rode along the edge of the meadow. Dagmar was silent so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke. Wolf the Swift, they called him. He was a shipbuilder, not a warrior, though he could wield an axe when needed. His hands were always rough with splinters and smelled of pine tar. Her voice softened with memory. He built the fastest longships on the western fjord. A valuable skill, Peder noted. One that might draw unwanted attention. "What do you mean?" "A shipbuilder who crafts the fastest vessels would be coveted by any chieftain," Peder explained. "Especially one looking to expand his raiding territory." Dagmar considered this. "The night of the raid, I was gathering herbs in the forest. When I returned, the settlement was in flames. A neighbor, dying from his wounds, told me the Knutson clan had come for my father's ships." Her voice hardened. "They burned them all and took him when he tried to stop them. And no one questioned why a clan would destroy what they supposedly came to steal." Peder asked. The truth hit Dagmar like a physical blow. "It was a lie," she whispered. "The Knutson name was used to hide the true culprits." Before Peder could respond, a horn blast echoed across the meadow. One of the men pointed to the tree line, where mounted figures had appeared. "Raiders," Peder said, drawing his sword. Not yours, they bear the Black Wolf banner. Dagmar's blood froze in her veins. The Wolf clan. Jarl Sigurd's men. You know them. Jarl Sigurd was my father's cousin, she said, realization dawning. After the raid, he took me in, trained me as a Shieldmaiden. He told me it was the Knutsons who killed my father. The raiders charged toward the scattered cattle. Peder shouted orders to his men, who formed a defensive position around the herd. Leif, ride for the settlement. Bring reinforcements. Peder commanded. The boy hesitated, torn between obedience and desire to fight, but finally galloped away. Dagmar drew her sword, conflict raging within her. These were her people attacking. The warriors she had trained alongside for 3 years. Dagmar, Peder said urgently, reading her hesitation. If what you suspect is true, these men may have killed your father. But I cannot judge that now. My people need protection. Where do you stand? She made her choice in an instant, raising her shield. With those who speak truth. The raiders hit their line like a wave crashing against rock. Dagmar found herself fighting shoulder to shoulder with Peder, their movements surprisingly coordinated for opponents turned allies. Her shield protected his left side, while his powerful sword strokes cleared space before them. Through the chaos of battle, Dagmar recognized faces, men she had feasted with, trained with. Men who had known her father. Men who had watched her swear vengeance on the wrong clan. Dagmar, came a shocked cry. Hakon, one of Jarl Sigurd's lieutenants, lowered his weapon in surprise. What are you doing with these farmers? Learning the truth, Hakon, she replied, her shield firm. Was it Jarl Sigurd who ordered my father's death? The warrior's face hardened. Your father refused to build ships for the Jarl. He was going to take his craft to the southern settlements. The Jarl couldn't allow such disrespect. Rage filled Dagmar, but it was a cold rage now, focused like the edge of a blade. And the Knutson banner? The lie that sent me hunting innocent blood. The Jarl's idea, Hakon admitted with a shrug. He knew you'd never rest without vengeance. Better to point you at our enemies than risk your discovering the truth. 3 years of misdirected hatred crashed down on Dagmar. 3 years of blood spilled for a lie. With a cry of anguish and fury, she charged Hakon, her shield smashing into his chest before her sword found the gap in his armor. For my father, she whispered as the light faded from his eyes. For the truth. The battle shifted as Peder's men rallied around Dagmar's ferocity. The raiders, unsettled by her defection and the death of Hakon, began to retreat. A horn sounded from the forest edge, Leif returning with reinforcements. The raiders broke, fleeing toward the northern pass. In the aftermath, Dagmar stood amid the blooded grass, her sword hanging limp at her side. Peder approached cautiously. "Are you injured?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only my pride. 3 years of my life spent serving my father's murderer. 3 years of hatred directed at innocent people." "Not entirely innocent," Peder said, gesturing to the dead raiders. "These were your Jarl's men, yet they came to raid our cattle. There is blood between our clans, Dagmar, but not the blood you thought." "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly weary to her bones. Peder sheathed his sword. "Now we bring the herd home. We prepare for winter. And we consider what justice looks like for a Shieldmaiden who has been as much a victim as those she sought to harm." Winter descended on the settlement with icy fingers. The rebuilt longhouses stood firm against howling winds, their hearth fires burning bright through long nights. Dagmar found unexpected peace in the rhythm of winter life, mending, weaving, preserving food, and telling stories around the fire. The settlement's women gradually accepted her presence, first out of respect for Peder's decree, then out of recognition of her contributions. Dagmar's warrior strength proved valuable for winter hunts and protecting the settlement from wolves that grew desperate as the season deepened. Peder watched her transformation with quiet interest. The vengeful Shieldmaiden was still there in her straight spine and watchful eyes, but something new had emerged, a woman who laughed at Leif's antics, who listened to the elders' tales with respect, who worked the loom with increasing skill. "Your hands are not made for weaving," observed Hilda, the settlement's oldest woman, as Dagmar struggled with tangled threads. "They're made for shields and swords," Dagmar agreed ruefully. "Perhaps," Hilda said, her ancient fingers deftly correcting Dagmar's work, "but they can learn new skills. My mother told me the Norns weave our fates on looms much like this one. Perhaps in learning to weave cloth, you learn to recognize the pattern of your own fate." Dagmar considered the intricate design taking shape. "And what pattern do you see in my fate, grandmother?" Hilda's rheumy eyes studied her. A pattern interrupted. A thread cut, then rewoven in an unexpected direction. Her gaze shifted to where Peder sat discussing spring planting with his advisors. "And perhaps joined with another thread not of your choosing, but of your destiny." Heat rushed to Dagmar's cheeks. "Peder Knutson is my captor, not my fate." "Is he?" Hilda cackled. "I've lived long enough to know that the gods delight in bringing together those who begin as enemies. It makes for better sagas." That night, as a blizzard raged outside, the settlement gathered in the great hall. The harvest had been good despite the raid, and food remained plentiful. Mead flowed as a skald sang ancient tales of gods and heroes. Dagmar sat beside Peder at the high table, an honor position that had gradually become hers by unspoken agreement. The settlement had begun to see her not as prisoner but as protector. "The wolf packs grow bolder," Peder said, pitching his voice low beneath the skald singing. "3 sheep taken last night, despite the fences." "I'll lead a hunting party tomorrow," Dagmar offered. "We can track them from the eastern pasture." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the hearth fire. "I would join you, but the council meets to discuss spring planting. The southern field needs clearing before the thaw." "Always the farmer," she teased gently. "Would you prefer me as a raider?" he asked, a rare smile softening his features. "No," she admitted. "I've seen enough of glory won through bloodshed. There's more honor in coaxing life from the earth than in taking it." His expression grew serious. "3 months ago, you came to our shores seeking vengeance. Now you speak of honor in farming. You've changed, Dagmar Wulfsdottir." "Perhaps I've remembered who I was before vengeance consumed me," she said quietly. "My father built ships, but he also taught me to respect what sustains life. He would be ashamed of what I became after his death." "And now?" She met his gaze steadily. "Now I seek to honor his memory by protecting what he would have valued, people who work with their hands to build rather than destroy." The skald song ended, and Bjorn rose, calling for silence. "The winter solstice approaches," he announced, "and with it, our offering to Freya for fertility in the coming spring. This year, our offering must be especially generous, as we rebuild from raid and fire." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. "But first," Bjorn continued, his voice carrying to the rafters, "we must address the matter of the Shieldmaiden among us." The hall grew still, all eyes turning to Dagmar. She straightened, ready to face judgment. "Dagmar Wulfsdottir came to our shores as an enemy," Bjorn said. "Yet when battle turned to fire, she chose to save our chieftain rather than take his life. Since then, she has labored alongside us, hunted for our table, and defended our borders." Nods of acknowledgement spread among the gathered people. "The terms of her stay end with the spring thaw," Bjorn reminded them. "I propose we offer her a choice, to return to her people or to remain among us as a free woman, no longer bound by life debt but by choice. Surprise rippled through Dagmar. She had expected to serve out her term and depart, perhaps with less hatred but still as an outsider. The offer of belonging was unexpected. Peder stood. I support Bjorn's proposal, but would add to it. If Dagmar chooses to stay, I would have her take a formal oath as our settlement Shieldthane, responsible for training our defenders and protecting our borders. The hall erupted in discussion. Shieldthane was a position of honor, rarely granted to outsiders, never to former enemies, and almost never to women. An elderly warrior named Torsten rose shakily to his feet. I fought beside Wulf the Swift in my youth, before he settled on the western fjord. He was an honorable man. I see his strength in his daughter, but also wisdom he lacked. I support this proposal. Others rose to speak, some in favor, some expressing doubts. Through it all, Dagmar remained silent, stunned by the turn of events. Finally, Peder turned to her. The choice is yours, Dagmar Wulfsdottir. When spring comes, what path will you walk? All eyes turned to her, waiting. Dagmar rose slowly. 3 seasons ago, I came here with hatred in my heart, seeking blood for blood. I found instead a truth that shattered the foundation of my vengeance. Her clear voice carried throughout the hall. I have lived among you, worked beside you, fought to protect what you value. I have learned that there is honor in building as well as battle. She took a breath, her decision crystallizing. When spring comes, I would remain as your Shieldthane, not to seek glory in war but to ensure peace for those who sow and harvest. My shield will stand between your people and harm, as it already stands in my heart. Approval rumbled through the hall. Peder's face showed relief and something deeper that made Dagmar's heart quicken. Then it is decided, Bjorn announced. With the spring thaw, Dagmar Wulfsdottir will take the oath as Shieldthane. The celebration that followed lasted deep into the night, but Dagmar slipped away early, needing solitude to process the day's events. She stood outside, watching the snow swirl in the moonlight. Footsteps crunched behind her, and she knew without turning that Peder had followed. Are you certain of your choice? He asked, coming to stand beside her. I am, she replied. But it doesn't resolve the matter of Jarl Sigurd. He remains unpunished for my father's death. One battle at a time, Shieldthane, Peder said. Winter gives us months to prepare. When spring comes, we can seek justice together. The words together hung in the frigid air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to voice. Why did you support Bjorn's proposal? She asked. 3 months ago, I stood ready to kill you. Peder turned to face her, snowflakes catching in his beard. Because I've watched you change from an enemy to a protector. Because my people respect you. Because, he hesitated, then continued more softly, because I believe that God sent you to us for a purpose greater than vengeance. Dagmar felt the weight of fate in his words. And what purpose is that, Peder Knutson? Instead of answering, he reached out slowly, giving her time to step away. When she remained still, he gently touched the falcon pendant at her throat. Your father's? He asked. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. A falcon sees clearly from great heights, Peder said. Perhaps he sent you to us so you could see the truth from a new perspective. Perhaps he guides you still, toward a future he would want for his daughter. His hand dropped away, but Dagmar caught it in her own. Their fingers intertwined, warm against the winter chill. Perhaps, she whispered, he does. Spring came with a rush of melting snow and green shoots pushing through dark earth. The settlement hummed with activity as fields were plowed, seeds planted, and new lambs born. Dagmar took her oath as Shieldthane on the first day of planting, swearing before gods and people to protect the settlement with her life. The ceremony ended with Peder placing an arm ring of silver on her wrist, marking her new status. "Wear it with honor," he said formally, but his eyes conveyed a more personal message that made her pulse quicken. In the weeks that followed, Dagmar trained the settlement's defenders, teaching them shield tactics she had learned among the Shieldmaidens. Young women joined the practice, inspired by her example, while even skeptical elders came to acknowledge her skill. Through it all, her relationship with Peder deepened. They spoke of plans for the settlement's defense, of crop rotations and cattle breeding, but also of childhood memories, of hopes and fears, of the gods and their mysteries. They moved together like dancers, learning each other's rhythms, sometimes stepping on toes, sometimes flowing in perfect harmony. The settlement noticed. Whispers and knowing looks followed them, but neither acknowledged the growing bond between them. There was work to be done, and justice still to seek. As the days lengthened, scouts reported increased activity from the Wolf clan to the west. Jarl Sigurd had learned of Dagmar's defection and was furious. Raids on nearby settlements had grown more frequent, more violent. "He means to provoke us," Peder said during a council meeting. "Or to draw Dagmar out." "Then let me go," Dagmar said. "I'll challenge him to homegang. Single combat for my father's murder. Alone against Jarl Sigurd." Bjorn scoffed. "He wouldn't fight fairly. He'd have you killed before you could issue the challenge." "Bjorn speaks truth," Peder agreed. "We need a different approach." They debated long into the night, finally agreeing on a plan. They would send a delegation to the neighboring settlements that had suffered from the Wolf clan's raids, proposing an alliance. United, they would be strong enough to demand a formal assembly where accusations could be made and justice sought. Peder would lead the delegation, while Dagmar remained to protect the settlement. Neither was happy with the separation, but both recognized its necessity. The night before his departure, Peder sought Dagmar at the training field, where she was inspecting newly crafted shields. "These will serve well," she said, testing the weight of one. "The limewood is flexible but strong." Like its maker, Peder observed, watching her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. Dagmar set down the shield, suddenly uncertain. 3 months of winter had transformed her feelings for this man from suspicion to respect to something deeper that frightened her with its intensity. "You leave at dawn," she said, stating the obvious to fill the charged silence. "I do." He stepped closer. "I would have something settled between us before I go." Her heart thundered in her chest. What matter needs settling? "This," he said simply, and closed the distance between them. His kiss was gentle but sure, like a man who knew his own mind. Dagmar froze for a heartbeat, then responded with a warrior's decisiveness, her hands finding his shoulders, then his hair. When they parted, breathless, Peder rested his forehead against hers. "I would have you as my wife, Dagmar Wulfsdottir. Not as alliance or obligation, but because my heart recognizes yours as its match." Joy and fear warred within her. "I came to your shores as your enemy," she reminded him. "And now you stand as our protector," he countered. "The gods have a strange sense of humor, weaving our lives together through blood and fire into something new." Dagmar thought of Hilda's words about threads rewoven. The settlement would never accept a former raider as their chieftain's wife. Peder smiled. "Have you not noticed how they look to you already? How they seek your counsel? How the children trail after you like ducklings? They accepted you as Shieldthane. They will rejoice to call you their chieftain's wife." "And what of Jarl Sigurd?" "My father's murder remains unavenged." "Justice, not vengeance," Peder corrected gently. We will face that challenge together, as we have faced everything since you spared my life beneath that burning timber. Dagmar touched the falcon pendant at her throat, imagining her father's voice. Would he want endless blood feud or a new beginning for his daughter? She knew the answer in her heart. Yes, she said finally. When justice is done and peace secured, I will be your wife, Peder Knutson. His smile was brighter than spring sunshine. Then I have even greater reason to return swiftly and successfully. They sealed their promise with another kiss, witnessed only by the lengthening shadows and the gods who had led them on this unexpected path. Peder's delegation returned after a fortnight with good news. The neighboring settlements had agreed to an alliance against the Wolf clan's aggression. A thing was called for the next full moon, to be held on neutral ground. Jarl Sigurd could not refuse without losing face before the other chieftains. He agreed to attend with a limited entourage, as was custom. Preparations consumed the settlement. The thing would be as much about display of strength as about justice. Weapons were polished, finest clothes prepared, gifts readied for potential allies. As Shield Thane, Dagmar would stand at Peder's right hand during the proceedings. As his promised bride, she would wear the keys of the household at her belt, a clear statement of intent that set the settlement buzzing with excitement. The night before their departure, Dagmar knelt before the small shrine to Freya in her quarters. The goddess of love was also a warrior, riding to battle to claim half the slain. If any deity could understand Dagmar's journey from vengeance to love, it would be the Lady of the Varni. Guide my words tomorrow, Dagmar prayed, offering a strand of her hair to the flame. Let justice be done without more bloodshed. A soft knock interrupted her devotions. Hilda entered, carrying a bundle wrapped in linen. You should wear something fitting your new status tomorrow, the old woman said without preamble. She unwrapped the bundle to reveal a gown of deep blue wool embroidered at neck and sleeves with intricate knotwork in silver thread. Dagmar touched it reverently. This is too fine for me. Nonsense, Hilda snorted. It was my daughter's wedding gown. She would have been pleased to see it worn by our Shield Thane. Her rheumy eyes twinkled. Besides, it will remind everyone that you are more than just a warrior now. Dagmar embraced the old woman, throat tight with emotion. Thank you for seeing me as more than an enemy. The god sent you to us for a reason, Hilda said, patting her back. Even an old woman like me can recognize their hand at work. The next morning, the delegation departed with the rising sun. Dagmar rode beside Peder, the blue gown beneath her cloak, her shield strapped to her back. 20 warriors accompanied them, along with Bjorn and 2 other council members. The neutral ground chosen for the thing was a sacred grove halfway between the territories. Ancient oak trees formed a natural hall, their branches creating a living roof above the assembly place. Stone benches arranged in a circle provided seating for the chieftains and their advisors. Jarl Sigurd's party arrived as Peder's people were setting up their camp. Dagmar's heart pounded at the sight of the Wolf clan banner, the same black wolf she had once proudly followed. The Jarl himself rode at the front, his grey beard braided with gold, his cloak pinned with a massive brooch shaped like a wolf's head. His eyes found Dagmar immediately, narrowing with hatred. She met his gaze steadily, her hand on her sword hilt. The other allied settlements arrived throughout the day. By nightfall, 5 chieftains and their entourages had made camp around the sacred grove. According to tradition, the thing would begin at midday tomorrow, after proper sacrifices to Odin and Tyr, gods of wisdom and justice. That night, Peder and Dagmar walked the perimeter of their camp. Stars glittered overhead, and a sliver of moon cast just enough light to see. Are you certain of this path? Peder asked quietly. Once accusations are made before the thing, there is no turning back. Blood must answer blood, whether through weregild or combat. Dagmar nodded. 3 years I've carried my father's death like a stone in my heart. Tomorrow I lay that burden down, one way or another. He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. Whatever happens, you do not stand alone. She smiled in the darkness. That, Peder Knutson, is the greatest gift you've given me. Morning brought clear skies and a warm breeze, good omens for the thing. Dagmar donned the blue gown, arranging her father's falcon pendant at her throat. She braided her hair in the complex style of a betrothed woman, with Hilda's silver threads woven through the plaits. Peder's breath caught when he saw her. "You look like a Valkyrie come to earth," he said, his voice husky. "Let us hope I need not guide anyone to Valhalla today," she replied, though she strapped her sword belt over the gown, practical despite the finery. At midday, horns sounded, calling the assembly to the grove. The chieftains and their closest advisers took their places on the stone benches. Dagmar sat at Peder's right hand, aware of the murmurs her presence caused among those who knew her former allegiance. Jarl Sigurd sat directly across the circle, his expression thunderous at the sight of Dagmar in Knutson colors, the household keys at her belt marking her as bride-to-be of his enemy. The eldest chieftain, a man named Gorm Stoneye, stood to open the proceedings. "We gather under Odin's watchful gaze to settle disputes and seek justice," he intoned. "Let all who speak here speak truth, or may the gods strike them down." Ritual complete, he gestured to Peder. "Peder Knutson, you have called this thing. Speak your grievance." Peder rose, his bearing dignified. "I speak not only for my clan but for all here who have suffered raids from the Wolf clan in recent seasons. Jarl Sigurd has broken peace, stolen cattle, and burned settlements without provocation or declaration of feud." Murmurs of agreement came from the other chieftains. Jarl Sigurd's face darkened, but he remained silent, waiting his turn as tradition demanded. More gravely, Peder continued, "I accuse Jarl Sigurd of the murder of Wulf the shipbuilder 3 summers past, not in honorable combat but in treachery, burning his vessels and taking his life when he refused to build ships for the Wolf clan's raids." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Murder of a craftsman was a serious crime, doubly so if done through treachery rather than open challenge. To conceal this crime, Peder went on, his voice carrying clearly, "Jarl Sigurd falsely claimed that our clan was responsible, directing the dead man's daughter to seek vengeance against innocent blood." He gestured to Dagmar. "Dagmar Wulfsdottir, who sits at my right hand, was deceived for 3 years before learning the truth from one of Jarl Sigurd's own warriors." All eyes turned to Dagmar. She rose, composed despite the scrutiny. "I am Wulf's daughter," she confirmed. "For 3 years I served the Wolf clan as Shieldmaiden, believing Jarl Sigurd's lie that the Knutsons had murdered my father. I came with raiders to Peder Knutson's settlement, seeking blood for blood." She recounted the battle, the fire, her discovery of the truth through Hakon's dying confession. Her clear voice never wavered, even as she described her father's death. "I demand justice for my father," she concluded. "And for all those whose lives were taken or disrupted by raids built on Jarl Sigurd's lies." When she finished, silence hung heavy in the grove. Then Jarl Sigurd stood, his face contorted with rage. "These are the words of a traitor and a woman," he spat. "Dagmar Wulfsdottir betrayed her oath to me, her kinsman by blood. She spreads lies to justify her betrayal." "They are not lies," came a voice from the edge of the circle. A warrior stepped forward, Sven, who had trained alongside Dagmar in the Wolf clan. "I was there when Wulf the shipbuilder died. Jarl Sigurd ordered his death when he refused to build warships for our clan. I helped raise the Knutson Raven banner as false evidence." Jarl Sigurd's hand went to his sword. "You betray your oath, dog." "I honor truth above a false oath," Sven replied steadily. "The gods see all, Jarl Sigurd." They have waited 3 years for justice. They wait no longer. Murmurs spread through the assembly. One chieftain after another voiced support for Peder's accusation, recounting their own losses to wolf clan raids. Gormstoneye raised his hand for silence. The accusation stands with witness. How do you answer, Jarl Sigurd? The Jarl's eyes darted around the circle, seeking allies and finding none. I demand trial by combat, he said finally. Let the gods decide between us. Agreed, Peder said before Dagmar could speak. I will face you in Holmgang on behalf of my people and my bride-to-be. No, Dagmar interrupted, stepping forward. Wulf was my father. The right of vengeance is mine. Jarl Sigurd laughed harshly. You would fight me, girl? I trained you myself. Yes, Dagmar replied evenly. You trained me to kill Knutsons. How fitting that those skills should now serve justice. The assembly buzzed with excitement. A Shieldmaiden challenging a Jarl to Holmgang was unprecedented. Gormstoneye frowned. This is irregular. Traditionally, male kin fight for a woman's honor. With respect, Gormstoneye, Dagmar said, I am Shield Thane of the Knutson settlement. I stand as warrior, not merely as woman. Peder placed a hand on her shoulder. The choice is yours by right, Dagmar Wulfsdottir. But know that I stand ready to fight in your stead. She covered his hand with hers. I know. But this battle is mine to finish. Gormstoneye considered, then nodded slowly. The challenge is accepted. Holmgang will be held at sunset. 3 shields each, as is tradition. If Dagmar Wulfsdottir falls, the accusation is dismissed. If Jarl Sigurd falls, his guilt is confirmed, and his lands forfeit to his victims. The assembly dispersed to prepare. Peder led Dagmar back to their camp, concern etched on his features. He is stronger than you, he said quietly. But slower, she countered. And blinded by rage. I've watched him fight for 3 years. I know his weaknesses. Peder helped her prepare, checking her sword edge, testing her shield straps. As the sun began its descent, he cupped her face in his hands. Come back to me, he said simply. She kissed him, fierce and quick. I intend to. The Holmgang ground had been prepared, a square marked with hazel branches, as tradition dictated. Dagmar took her position, 3 shields stacked behind her. Across the square stood Jarl Sigurd, his face a mask of hatred. Gormstoneye recited the rules. The combat ends when one party steps outside the marked area, is unable to continue, or has broken all 3 shields. May the gods witness and justice prevail. A horn sounded, and the Holmgang began. Jarl Sigurd attacked immediately, his sword sweeping in a powerful arc. Dagmar raised her shield, absorbing the blow but feeling the impact reverberate through her arm. She circled, keeping her distance, studying his movements. You always were a cautious fighter, Sigurd taunted. Too afraid to commit. Dagmar didn't respond, focusing on her footwork. She had seen him fight enough to know his pattern, 3 aggressive attacks followed by a brief pause to reset. She weathered the first onslaught, her shield taking the brunt of his powerful blows. On his 3rd strike, she was ready. Instead of backing away, she stepped into his attack, her shield catching his blade at an angle that sent it sliding harmlessly aside. Her own sword darted forward, scoring a line across his forearm. First blood to Dagmar. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Enraged, Sigurd pressed harder, his blows raining down with such force that Dagmar's first shield split down the center. She discarded it, taking up her second as she continued to circle. You killed my father, she said, her voice carrying across the silent assembly. You took his life because he refused to build tools for your greed. He was a fool. Sigurd snarled. He could have had wealth and honor at my side. Instead, he chose death. He chose honor over wealth, Dagmar corrected, deflecting another blow. A choice you never understood. She feinted left, then slipped right, her blade finding Sigurd's thigh. He howled, stumbling but recovering quickly. The combat continued, Dagmar's second shield giving way under Sigurd's furious assault. Her third and final shield felt light in her grip, one more failure and she would face his blade unprotected. The sun touched the horizon, bathing the homegang ground in golden light. Dagmar felt a strange calm descend. Her father had built ships to connect people, to trade, to explore, and not to raid and destroy. In death, he had inadvertently led her to Peder, to a people who valued creation over destruction. For my father, she whispered, and launched her own attack. Surprised by her sudden aggression, Sigurd fell back a step. Dagmar pressed forward, her sword a silver blur in the fading light. She struck not with rage but with purpose, each blow calculated, each step sure. Sigurd's second shield cracked. His third barely deflected a thrust aimed at his heart. Sweat poured down his face as he fought with increasing desperation. Dagmar felt her own shield giving way. One more powerful blow would shatter it. Instead of retreating, she surged forward, inside Sigurd's guard. Her shield caught his descending blade and shattered, but the momentary opening was all she needed. Her sword found his heart. Wulf sends his regards, she said softly as the light faded from his eyes. Jarl Sigurd fell, dead before he hit the ground. A moment of shocked silence, then the assembly erupted in cheers. Peder reached her first, gathering her into his arms despite the blood and sweat. Justice is done, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling limbs. And a new beginning made possible, he replied. Gorm's stone eye approached, raising his hand for silence. The gods have spoken through combat. Jarl Sigurd's guilt is confirmed. His lands and holdings are forfeit to his victims, to be divided fairly among those he wronged. The other chieftains nodded in agreement. As for the Wolf clan, Gorm continued, they require new leadership. His gaze fell on Sven, who had testified against his Jarl. The thing will convene tomorrow to settle this matter. Dagmar leaned heavily against Peder as they returned to camp. The adrenaline of combat was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Yet her heart felt lighter than it had in 3 years. Her father was avenged. Justice, not vengeance, had prevailed. What happens now? She asked as Peder tended her minor wounds. He smiled, binding a cut on her forearm. Now we return home, prepare for harvest, and plan a wedding. Home. The word resonated within her. She had found a home among those she had once named enemy. Found love where she had sought hatred. Found truth where she had been fed lies. A wedding, she agreed, touching his face. But first, we ensure peace. The thing concluded the following day with Sven named as temporary leader of the Wolf clan, tasked with reforming their ways and making reparations to those harmed by their raids. A formal peace was established between all clans present, sealed with oaths and exchanges of gifts. As part of the settlement, the finest of the Wolf clan ships, ironically, one built by Wulf himself before his death, was given to Dagmar as Wergild. She, in turn, presented it to Peder and his people, completing the circle of justice and reconciliation. They returned home heroes, greeted by a settlement eager for news. The tale of Dagmar's victory and homegang spread quickly, growing more elaborate with each telling. Children reenacted the battle in the village square, arguing over who would play the Shieldmaiden and who the villainous Jarl. Preparations for the wedding began immediately. The harvest festival would coincide with their hand fasting, a time of abundance and new beginnings. On the morning of her wedding, Dagmar stood before a polished bronze mirror in the chamber that would soon be hers and Peder's. Hilda and other women of the settlement had helped her dress in a gown of deep green, embroidered with golden threads that caught the sunlight. Her hair hung loose down her back, crowned with a wreath of autumn flowers. At her throat, the falcon pendant gleamed. She touched it gently, imagining her father's pride. "Are you ready, Shieldmaiden?" Leif asked, poking his head through the doorway. Now 13, he had appointed himself her personal guard for the day. "Ready, young Knutson," she replied, smiling at his serious expression. The entire settlement had gathered in the sacred grove where the gods were honored. Torches lined the path despite the daylight, symbolizing the light that would guide their union through winter's darkness. Peder waited by the ancient oak, his face solemn yet radiant. Beside him stood Bjorn, holding the sword Peder would give her, an ancestral blade symbolizing his protection and trust. In turn, Dagmar would present him with a shield she had crafted herself, representing her promise to guard him and their people. As she walked the torchlit path, Dagmar remembered the day she had first set foot in this settlement, sword in hand, vengeance in her heart. How strange and wonderful were the workings of the gods, that hatred could be transformed so completely into love. The ceremony was simple but profound. Bjorn, as eldest male kin to Peder, gave the bride to her groom. Hilda, standing in for Dagmar's family, presented the bride to the community. Vows were exchanged, rings passed, swords and shields given and received. "With this ring, I take you as wife," Peder said, sliding a gold band onto her finger. "To stand beside in battle and peace, in plenty and hardship, in this life and beyond." "With this ring, I take you as husband," Dagmar replied, her clear voice carrying to all assembled. "To build with rather than destroy, to plant rather than burn, to love rather than hate, in this life and beyond." 3 drops of blood from each of them sealed their union, mingling on the sacred earth. The assembled community cheered as Peder pulled Dagmar into a kiss that promised both tenderness and passion. The feast that followed lasted well into the night. Mead flowed freely, songs were sung, and tales told. The schools had already composed verses about the Shieldmaiden who fell in love with her enemy, the farmer chieftain whose wisdom turned hatred to alliance. As the celebration continued around them, Peder drew Dagmar away from the noise, into the quiet of the night. "Are you happy, wife?" he asked, his arms encircling her. "Happier than I believed possible, husband," she replied, leaning into his embrace. 3 summers ago, I would have laughed at anyone who suggested I would wed a Knutson. And I would have thought it madness to take a raider as bride, he agreed, chuckling. Now I cannot imagine a more perfect match. They looked out over the settlement that was now truly their home. Torches still blazed in the feast hall, but beyond lay the darkened fields ready for winter's rest, the forests that provided game and timber, the fjord that connected them to the wider world. Everyone laughed when the Shieldmaiden fell for a Viking farmer, Dagmar mused, remembering the whispers and jokes when their growing attachment became known. "Now they beg for our protection." Peder's laugh rumbled through his chest. "And they shall have it, the warrior's shield and the farmer's sustenance. Together, we offer what neither could provide alone." Dagmar turned in his arms, looking up at the face that had become dearer to her than any other. "The gods work in strange ways, Peder Knutson." "That they do, Dagmar Knutson," he replied, using her new name for the first time. "That they do." He kissed her beneath the stars, as the autumn wind carried the scent of harvest and hearth fires. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirit of a shipbuilder smiled to see his daughter find harbor after the storm.